All right, everyone, I have Pam Moore on the podcast. I'm excited to chat with her. She's an occupational therapist turned intuitive eating coach, and I'm really excited to dive in with her because I started looking through her Instagram, and you're hilarious. You crack me up. Like, I
Thank you.
was laughing at your videos, but they're also like, you present information that's like funny, but also true. Like hitting on the fad dieting, like the one where you're eating the carrot and you're like, this is going to fix my life, and or I loved what you shared about being a spin instructor and the things that you don't say in your class. Like how many times you're in a class and they're like, work off, like it's the weekend, like work off everything you're going to eat this weekend. And it's like, that's not how I want to live it. Like I should feel guilty about that, or I should, like, I'm confused,
Yeah.
So I'm excited to dive into all of this with you. So thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Oh, thank you for having me, Liz. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah. So before we dive into your career, I'd love for you to share a little bit. You have two children?
I do. Yes. I have two girls who are almost 11 and 8.
Oh my goodness. How's that?
It's
Because I have two girls.
it's really fun. The highs are really high, the lows are really low, like all of parenting. But I love them, of course. You know, you know how it is. It's like you're dying to be with them. You want to spend so much time with them, but then sometimes when you're with them, you're like, wait, I just want to be alone.
Yeah.
But it's fun. I love watching them have a friendship. I love, they each have their own personality. It's so distinct from each other and from me. Actually, one of them really takes after me. But yeah, I love it.
Yeah, that's so fun. I know. I'm like my one sister, her daughter's already like grown in her 20s, and my other one, hers just turned 12, and she's like, oh, like, they're just like hitting different levels.
It's always
like,
something.
right.
Like once you feel like you have things figured out, which I almost never do, but if I do, it's like, okay, then it's a new phase. It changes.
Right. Totally. It's always adjusting. So we were chatting a little bit before the podcast, and I'd love for you to talk a little bit about your birth stories, because you had an exposure before you were even thinking about birth that kind of maybe set the trajectory that which you took.
Yeah.
Births.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I have a good friend who, this was actually crazy. We were very close in high school, completely lost touch. She found me on Facebook 10 years later. And for context, we are from Rhode Island, or she's not, whatever. That's where we met. I grew up in Rhode Island. Now we're both in Colorado. I'm in Boulder. She's in Denver. She reaches out to me via Facebook. I don't recognize her miniature, like avatar picture saying, hey, this person has sent you a friend request, because they used to go by a nickname. Now she goes by her full name, which I just never knew her as that. She's gotten married, has a completely new last name. And I'm like, what is this? Is this spam? And I look a little harder and I'm like, oh my God, it's my old friend. So we reconnected like no time had passed. And like a year and a half later, she's like, I'm having a home birth. I'm inviting close friends. Would you like to come? And I was so pumped. I have to say, being at that birth is the only time I've ever called out of work for like I don't want to say it was a not legitimate reason, but I lied. I said I was sick. I was not sick. I was waiting for this baby to be born. It was, I think I got there in the evening. The baby was born like the next morning. And it was such a powerful experience to watch a baby come into the world. And I was really moved, but I also thought at the time, no way I'm ever doing that. Like I would definitely be doing this in the hospital. Fast forward 2 or 3 years later, now it's my turn to have a baby. And I've been working in the hospital at this point as an occupational therapist for at least 7 years or so. And I've seen a lot of mistakes happen in the hospital. I mean, I've seen a lot of good things happen. I mean, doctors, nurses, OTs, PTs, we do good work and we are generally there to serve the patient. But when I saw mistakes happen, which they do, it was often because people were too rushed, too busy, and didn't know the patient. There was no personal connection there. And when I was looking into like, okay, how's this going to work if I have a baby? Most of the time when you go, I'm sure you go to an OB practice and there may be 6 or 7 people that could be on call when you're ready to have the baby. Or you go and you're maybe bonding with your nurse and then her shift is over and a new nurse comes in. And I'm like, I saw my friend give birth. I'm like, I don't want to be trying to form connections with new people while I'm in labor. That's not the time. And I read some books and I did some research and I just thought, if this is a low risk pregnancy, which both of mine were, I live very close to a hospital. At the time, there was no birth center near me. I just felt like home birth is the way to go for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I have like a few questions off of what you said. So first of all, going back to your friend, inviting people to be there. What was that like? Like, how many people were at the birth? Were you guys like, because I go back and forth with like who I would want, because I had one in the hospital, one at a birthing center. Still, my next question: how did you get your husband on board? Because that's what I'm working on.
Okay.
And I'm like, I love it at home because I watched my sister have all 4 of her kids at home. But it was just me, my mom, dad. Like my dad, basically, like he filled the tub, he cleaned up after. He was so sweet.
Your dad was present?
He wasn't he didn't watch the birth.
Okay.
He filled the tub when it was time, and then he like helped clean up like all the afterbirth with like all my sister's births. But
my dad can't even look at a bloody knee.
Oh, okay.
Like my dad is, I can't imagine that.
Yeah. Well, then he was just in the other room and like,
okay.
Helped make food, or, he would nap and then watch the other kids. So then it was just like my mom, me, her husband, and then like the midwife assistant. So, and I've debated, I'm like, would I invite a bunch of people? Would I not? Like, would I feel like a sitting duck, like having all these people watching me? Or are you like walking in and out of rooms? Like, what was the vibe with like her inviting friends there?
I can't speak for her experience, but as a guest, it felt like a party. There was so many women there. I would say there was at least 8 or 10 of us at any given time, including my friend's twin sister, me, a bunch of other really close friends, and then obviously the midwife. I think there was a midwife assistant. There might have even been a third assistant, and then there was the husband. It was a lot of people. And we had jobs. Like, I think, as I recall, it was a long time ago. As I recall, like the twin sister was in charge of like giving people jobs, and people took turns sleeping. Cause you know how it is. You don't really know when the baby's coming. At one point, my job was to hold a flashlight in a certain position so that the midwife could see what was going on while my friend was pushing. But I remember chit-chatting with some of the other women, like in a different room, not in the same room. Like when we were in the room with my friend, we were taking turns, like giving her ice cubes, or I think the husband and the twin sister took turns like pressing on her sacrum to give her hand. It was kind of social. And I went into my first birth thinking, I'm going to invite a number of people. I invited 5 people. I also gave them the caveat, like, I have to tell you, I've never done this before. I don't know how this is going to feel. Like, you're invited. I hope you will, like, if you can come, we'll text you. But I'm not. And we had a meeting. I recall we had a meeting with the midwife so she could kind of give them heads up on how things would go. But there was this big caveat of, you might not end up getting the call. You might just get the call like, I had the baby, I didn't call you. And which is what ended up happening. The biggest question mark was my mother, because I'm in Colorado. My mother lives in Rhode Island. I told her I wanted her there. Probably. So I was like, can you be here? But also, can you live with it? Will you not be hurt if I'm like, I really don't actually want anybody in here? And she said that would be fine. And what ended up happening was I wanted her there the whole time. Once I actually had a kid, I thought, ooh, that must have been hard for her to watch me, because it wasn't easy. It wasn't quick. It wasn't one of those, oh, I pushed twice and the baby was out. It was hard. It's hard to watch your kid be in pain, even if it's for a beautiful purpose and it's a natural thing. So after that, I was like, once I had my second kid, I was like, she does, I know what's going on here. She doesn't need to be here for that. It's more important for her to come when I need help with like my toddler and my newborn. But also the fact that you don't know when a baby's coming. My first baby came like, oh God, like 2 weeks after her due date. So my mom came, we had a good time together. I was on maternity leave. We watched a lot of Downton Abbey. We hung out. It was like a really kind of special bonding time that my mom was there, but I hadn't had the baby yet.
Yeah, that's so fun. And that's like good to kind of like put that message out there, like, hey, like, you might get a call to come, or you might get a call being like, she's here.
Yeah. And that's what happened. Oh, and you asked how I got my husband on board.
Yeah.
My husband is pretty laid back. And when it comes to things that he thinks I know more about, and he trusted me that I knew more about like hospitals because I've worked in them, and knew more about childbirth because I'd read all about it, he was like, it was so long ago. I don't know if we watched, like The Business of Being Born together. We might have. But I had read multiple books. I can't remember any of the names now. Like my kid is almost 11, so it was a while ago.
Probably like Ina May's Guide to Natural Childbirth. That's like a big one that a lot of people read.
I know I read it, but I can't remember if I read it before or after I made the decision. I read oh, now I remember. Wait, I almost remember.
It's right there.
God. It'll come back to me. But there was one book that was it shared a lot of data about how often interventions tend to happen and why they happen in hospitals. And if I could remember the name of it, maybe I'll go back in my Amazon history. But like that book swayed me. There was God, I'm trying to remember. He was just sort of, as I recall, he was kind of like, if you think this is the right move, then I'm on board. He was a pretty easy sell on that. Now, if he feels really strongly about something, he can be really stubborn. Like, it's not like we never have power struggles. We do. But that was something he didn't want to go to the mat for.
Right. Yeah. Which is interesting to me because it's like, I'm a birth worker. I do this all the time. I have all the information and knowledge, and my husband like is not on board. So it's not like, he's not like, hey, you know what you're doing. You do this, you've seen this, you've been at home births, you've been at hospital births, you've been in the birthing center, you've already had 2 children. Like, you know what I mean? And he's like, oh. Like,
well, here's another thing. And I don't know if this is just my husband's personality or something about the way he was raised. His parents let him watch very, very little TV. So I wonder, and he's not like a big pop culture person. He doesn't have the like media exposure that most of us grow up with. So he doesn't have this like library of like ambient images in his mind of those, those movies that are like 1 minute everything's fine and the next minute she's screaming bloody murder and she wants to kill everybody and she's having a baby. Like he never was exposed to that. And he's very much, in general, he kind of does what he wants, like for better or for worse. He doesn't care what other people think. He's very much a like, if I believe in something, I'm just going to do it. And that, that can totally go both ways. Sometimes it irritates the crap out of me. Right. But in this way, he was just like, okay, so what if everybody's doing it, the hospital way? Like we'll do our way.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I know that he has some people that have had traumatic births around him, but also being a birth worker, I can pinpoint where some of those things went wrong. And that part of it was because of the interventions that happened. I'm like, well, research shows when this thing happens, it leads to higher C-section rates without better incomes or better outcomes for babies. So that's exactly what was happening in this situation. So like, I'll present him. He's like, just show me all of the research, whatever. And I'm like, I feel like it doesn't depend. Like, it doesn't matter what I show you.
I have an idea for you. I have an idea. My husband will take an idea from somebody else that I've been saying like for years. And
I know, totally. It's
like we hired a professional organizer and she was like, what about these? The stack of like 100 business cards that I was like, why do you even need these? You just find this person on LinkedIn. And, I've been bugging him and the organizer was like, do you really need these? And immediately he was like, no. It needs to, and I'm the same way. My husband will be saying something and I'll be like, that's dumb. And then my sister will say it and I'll be like, that's freaking brilliant.
Right.
So if there's somebody else in your life that can put the bug in his ear, maybe that's the way to go.
I know it is true. It is true because I'll be talking about, like, he just sent me a podcast on like Huberman Labs about fertility. And I'm like, these are like different things that I say all the time, but because now it's like coming from somebody else, like, like they just like think like, oh, it was on this podcast that I listened to or whatever. And I'm like, okay, like I haven't been saying that for 5 years. Like, come on.
I think that's marriage in a nutshell.
True.
I love you the most and therefore I don't listen to you.
Right, exactly. You're a little too close to the situation, so I need to hear it from an outside source. Exactly. Which I'm sure I do the same to him. Yeah. And like you were saying, like, I'm sure I do the exact same. So then how did your second birth go?
It was good. It was different. And actually, since I think a lot of your listeners are probably in this like fertility, they're trying to have babies. This is something that I wish I had known that I would like to share about my second birth. Okay, so my first birth, I loved my midwife. Everything went great, even though it was like a long, drawn out birth. It was like a 30-hour start to finish kind of thing. And the baby came, just for context, I am 5 feet tall. My first child was 8 pounds, 8 ounces. and a little bit, overcooked, so to speak. I remember going, my midwife did send me to an OB toward the end and was like, I think, because we weren't sure if my water had broken. And she was like, I can't remember how things went. I feel like she did a litmus test on me, but she wanted me to do a non-stress test. So I went to the doctor, and the doctor said, if you still haven't had the baby in a week, come back. And I was like, oh my God, I can't not have had the baby in a week. It's already been like 10 days past. And I mean, I think because I pushed for so long, I think me being my size, and they estimated the non-stress test, they did this ultrasound and they were like, we think the baby's about 8.5 pounds. And I thought, oh, these tests are inaccurate. That's
all
impossible.
the
I'm so
time,
small.
right?
No, she was 8.5 pounds. I think for sure I would have had a C-section had I been in the hospital. I just don't think they would have let me labor for that long. But like nothing was wrong. Everything was fine. She did have the cord, I think, a little bit around her neck on the way out, but my midwife figured things out. She had me
Yeah.
stand up and she got it out of the way and everything was fine. Second baby, I had a different midwife. And I started with one. About 20 weeks into the pregnancy, I switched because, and this is something I would want to share with your listeners, I just had a bad feeling about her. I was texting her and she wasn't texting me back, and calling. I don't think I called her because I thought she was around. 10 days later, she got back to me and was like, I'm so sorry. I was out of town. Like, if you had left me a voicemail, you would have heard that my outgoing message said so. And I'm like, I feel like you should have told me that. If you're going to be out of town for that long, it just, and she was very flighty, and she was asking me for things like, I just got a bad vibe. So I was like, all right, I'm switching midwives. I don't feel good about this. Found a new midwife. I thought everything was fantastic. And I know this is probably controversial, but I didn't know what I was having, boy or girl, with either kid. And being Jewish, it was important to me that if I had a boy, we were going to do a circumcision, like, with a rabbi or whatever, like in a ritual way. And I completely respect that. I've seen midwives out there that say immediately on their website, I don't do or condone circumcisions. I just don't do it. And I completely respect that. I get it.
I feel like that's a
And
little weird though. Like I because like being a doula, people do things that I don't agree with all the time, but that's not my job. My job is to support you to make the best decisions for yourself. And especially like
yeah,
if it comes to like your religious beliefs or whatever, like
I mean,
that's
that's where I'm at. By the same token, I completely understand that people might be like, this is genital mutilation. And I'm not saying that it's not,
right.
like, I'm not an expert on that. I don't have like a hard stance on it, but I completely understand why anybody would say, I can't be part of this. I mean, but my midwife never said that. And I never thought to ask. It just didn't cross my mind to ask until I want to say like 30 weeks in, maybe I'm 30, 35 weeks pregnant. And she said, hey, look, if you want vitamin K, which, tell me if I'm wrong here, my understanding is that babies are not born with vitamin K, and it comes into which helps blood clot. They
Right.
get
Well,
it
it's
at a,
like, right. Well, it's like super fascinating how the Jewish culture does it on day 8, because that's when they start producing their own vitamin K.
not
So there's
wild.
like, yeah, there's like a reason why this has been this way for a long time with the circumcision. But in the hospitals, they usually don't wait till day 8. And
Right.
so if you are going to circumcise your son, then you definitely need to do the vitamin K.
Yeah. And they were telling me, even if you are going to do the circumcision on day 8, like, you still want the vitamin K on board, like, just in case. It's just
Yeah.
precautionary. It's a good thing. However, my midwife was like, I don't believe in vitamin K, period. Here's a study you can read. But it wasn't peer reviewed. It was just like a study in like a midwife magazine. It wasn't peer reviewed.
Right.
I was like, okay, it's someone's opinion, fine. And then she wanted me to watch these DVDs, this like Penn and Teller DVD on why circumcision is wrong. She was like, at least read these before you make your decision. And I'm like, but I don't remember exactly what I said to her, but in my mind, I was like, I have made my decision. I
Right.
don't
Right.
want this isn't a conversation or a negotiation. I'm doing what I'm going to do. So I was on my own to find the vitamin K, which was kind of weird. I was like calling the labor and delivery unit at my local hospital, be like, can I get vitamin K, like direct to consumer? How does this work? That was a little bit stressful, but mostly it really kind of broke trust between me and my
Yeah.
midwife. I just felt really judged by her. I
Mhm.
felt really alienated from her. And I felt like if I wasn't 35 weeks pregnant with my second child, like if this was my first child, I would be going into this like scared and nervous. And that kind of sucked. The birth
Yeah.
itself was great.
Hmm.
But I've been talking for a long time. So do you have any
No,
questions?
I love it because I feel like this is good because these are things that people don't necessarily think about. And again, I feel like as a birth worker, even if she's like, I don't believe in vitamin K, however, if this is something that you want to do, here's how you can get it. Here's how you know what I mean? Like still providing the resources. If she's like, hey, I don't administer vitamin K myself, but here's, because I know that there's the oral drops, they do them in a lot of countries in Europe. And there's like different things like that. So like still providing resources or
Yeah.
information, like it's sucks like when you have some like you shouldn't feel completely judged by your midwife
Yeah.
or your doula or whoever it is, and they might say, you know what, like I'm not a big fan of this, like totally get that that's what you want to do, like here's information if you want to go that way. I'm just like not a part of it, I'm not a part
Yeah.
of that part, but like here's the information that you need, here's how you can get the vitamin K, here's what you can do, like you should still be providing those
Yeah.
resources.
And I think you can do it in a non-judgmental way.
Totally.
But it was clear that she was judging me, so she
Right.
wasn't getting like it just didn't feel good. And it was ironic because like the reason I wanted a home birth was because I wanted a practitioner who I felt I had a solid relationship with.
Right.
And
Right.
so the relationship was, I would say, subpar.
But did
But
that like cloud your mind going into labor then? Like, did you feel like there was trust broken at all? Did you still feel safe with her?
I felt safe enough. I
Yeah.
felt like this isn't an A plus situation, but it's like a B plus, and that's gonna have to be good enough.
Yeah.
And
But
so
it's
I had to be
also
okay with that.
easier with your second. Like, if had that been your
Exactly.
first, like that could have been something that did really interfere with your birth.
Yes.
Whereas like your second, you're like, okay, my body's been through this. I know I can do it. Your mentality, I feel like, is so different your second time around.
Oh my God, you don't have the anxiety of like the fear of like, what's this going to be like? And with my first,
Yeah.
I needed that. And my
Yeah.
midwife was like, she was like such a mother personality. Like I just felt like whatever I had, she could hold 1,000 times. I just knew. I just felt
Yeah.
like this immense amount of trust.
Hmm.
And with the second midwife, it was like, all right, she's not perfect, but I just feel like she's going to be good enough. And I also was willing more to like just trust my instincts with my second child. With my first one, we had a like 20-week ultrasound, and there was some suspicious findings, but it was so vague. It was like, it could be nothing, or it could be trisomy 21, which is not compatible with life, or it could be cystic fibrosis. Definitely not something you want to do with like a home birth. And they were like, the next step would be an amniocentesis. And I was like, wait, what? I just went from like the lowest tech situation to like an amnio at 20 weeks. And then
Yeah.
what? Depending on the
Hmm.
amnio, like, do you get a late term abortion? Like, what then? So I was
Yeah.
freaking out. I did like went way down every rabbit hole on the internet. I was trying to find out what kind of ultrasound they used because some are more sensitive than others. I got the radiologist on the phone. And it was like a whole thing. And ultimately, it was something with the baby's bowel. And my mom, I mean,
Mm.
this is maybe a little woo woo and weird, but my mom was like, you had a weird thing with your bowels when you were a baby. I think you were very constipated. You turned blue at one point. We took you to the hospital. They couldn't figure out what was wrong. And she said, maybe it's just one of those things. Like, maybe don't worry about it. And for some reason, that was like very comforting to me. And I let it go. And the baby was fine. So with my
Hmm.
second, I was like, I don't know. I've had a good feeling this whole time. I don't want to do a 20-week ultrasound. I think I was 34 or 35. Why can't I remember? I think it was 35. But I was like, it's not going to do it. I'm just going to see what happens. She was fine. And so I think, I don't know, to this feeling of, okay, my midwife's not perfect, but I have a feeling that this is going to be fine. And I went into labor at like 2 o'clock. My in-laws came to pick up my other child, who at the time was 2, came to pick her up like 3 o'clock. By 4:30, the midwife got there, and the baby was born by like 6:30, which was awesome. Um, and the midwife, and this time I didn't even invite anybody. I just knew I wasn't going to want anybody. It was very like dark in the room. The midwife didn't really say anything to me. And at one point I was like, I could use like a little encouragement. It's like, are you going to talk? Like, this really hurts. And all she said was just like, yeah, that's normal. It's fine. Like, that means you're probably going to have the baby soon. And I felt like her assistant was actually like more of a rock to me. I really liked her assistant. And I was hopeful that it would be one of those things where like you push 3 times with your second child, like people say, and the baby will come. That didn't happen. It was like
Yeah. Oh
probably
man.
an hour of pushing. And again, a huge baby, 9 pounds and 6 ounces. But oh, this was cool. And I don't know if you do this with your clients, but my midwife had told me about how at some point when we started working together, she said, I want you to practice when you're having a bowel movement, do not push, just breathe. Have you heard of this strategy?
Yeah.
I was so skeptical, but I practiced. Oh, and when I called her references, I called some other moms to find out, just do my homework. And I was like, did you do that technique? Did it work? And they swore by it. And I was like, all right. So I practiced with the poops. And then when the baby came, I remembered to do my best not to actually push and just to like let it happen. And I was astonished at how, I don't want to say how easy it was, but I don't know. It worked. It worked. I had a 9-pound, 6-ounce baby and I didn't have one tear. I didn't have any pain with like anything peri after. It was incredible.
Yeah. This is random. Did you get hemorrhoids at all? Okay. Yeah, I did. Yeah. They're awful. I'm a year later and like I still now, so we got a bidet, which was like the best thing I've ever done for my life. And if we're on vacation somewhere and I have to like wipe for a week, I'll start bleeding. Like I bleed. And it's like a year later. I'm like, I need my bidet. Like I need this. So I feel like once I'm done having kids, I'm probably going to have to get hemorrhoid surgery.
Well, let me say, this is another, I'm glad you mentioned that because this is another thing I would want to share with your listeners. I feel like it was after my second, God, which one? After one of the kids was born, the hemorrhoids were really, really bad. And I was only 4 or 5 weeks postpartum and I went to the doctor. My doctor had left the practice. It was a new doctor who had moved from another state. So she's new to the state, new to me. We have no relationship. She sees my situation and she's like, you're going to need surgery. And I was like, wait, what? I have like a baby at home and I'm breastfeeding and that's not going to like work for my like life to have a major surgery right now. She's like, well, and I said, well, can you refer me to someone? Being new to the area, she didn't have anybody on hand that she thought was good. So I was kind of on my own, just like calling around, like who takes my insurance. And as I recall, God, it was so long ago. Sorry, I don't have all the details fresh in my mind, but for some reason, I think I talked to like a receptionist as I'm making the appointment. It might've been the receptionist that was like, oh, you're only like 5-6 weeks postpartum. Like maybe wait, like maybe this doesn't have to be stressful. Like maybe, and I did wait. And it got a lot better on its own. How graphic can we be on this podcast?
You can be graphic.
Okay. I still had some skin, like loose skin.
Yeah.
And it was annoying, but it stopped hurting. It wasn't so inflamed after a bit. And you can edit this part out, what I'm about to say. It's kind of gross. It's really gross, but it's so what ended up happening after my second was born, I was just sort of like, okay, the hemorrhoids didn't get worse, but this is just what it is. I'm going to have this skin here. It's fine. Yeah. Let me think for a second. 2-3 years ago. So now my second is like 6 or 7 years old. And this had happened, but I was on a run. And like something felt weird in my butt. And I don't have long hair, but it's curly. It sheds a lot. And I was like, I think there's like a hair in my butt. This has happened to me before. You get like hair in your butt crack. So, okay, is there hair in my butt? Well, there was hair tangled up in what I thought was a hemorrhoid. Now, this had happened to me before and I was able to deal with it. Oh, we're just at the beginning here. So I'm like, okay. I can deal with this. But I couldn't. It wasn't coming off. So I call my mother, as you do, and she's like, get in the bathtub and just go crazy with conditioner. Try that. It didn't work. So then I got my husband on board. I was like, you have to see what's going on here. Can you get like the scissors, like my eyebrow scissors? And he was like, no. He's like, I'm sorry. I love you. I'll do anything for you. I will not do that. Call my best friend who's a doctor. I try to like hardly ever call her with medical stuff because it's like what she does all day. She's like my best friend from growing up. And she was like, oh, you need to have that looked at. It could get necrotic because literally the hair was strangling it. She's like, if it gets necrotic, like you're kind of screwed. Like you need to. So the next morning, this went from like bad to terrible in like 8 hours. The next morning I wake up, it hurts. And I am calling around to like area proctologists, just being like, 1, do you take my insurance? And 2, can I come in today and can you deal with this? Because this is what's going on. And I'm telling all these receptionists, I'm like, I have a strand of hair strangling my butt skin. Like, what do I do?
Oh my gosh, I'm dying.
So I go to this proctologist and sure enough, he's like the hottest guy. Not just like a hot like doctor. He, like sometimes you're somewhere and you're like, oh, that guy is hot, like for this situation.
Right.
He was hot, period. He was hot. He was young. He had a great sense of humor, thankfully. Oh my God. What was good that he was like, if this is really a hemorrhoid I need to take out, like you need to go to the hospital and you need general anesthesia because I cannot do that here. And you would have to wait a few days. Like we couldn't get you in like right now. But thank God they got me on the table. He got to look at it. What I had thought was a hemorrhoid, he was like, this is actually a skin tag and I can do this right here, right now. He had to put a shot of lidocaine before he began, and I was terrified of it. And I'm like in my head trying to psych myself up, like you have had two enormous babies without medication. Certainly you can handle a numbing shot. And, you know, I think they'd already put numbing gel on it, but they were great. There was him and there was like two nurses in the room and they were just being so encouraging. And I was like, they didn't do it till I said I was ready. And it was funny because it didn't even hurt. It really didn't even hurt. When they got to it, it felt like a little bit of pressure. And I mean, for like 2 days, I had to like not run or not lift weights, or maybe a week. I can't remember, but it was so not a big deal. And now I don't have it anymore. And it was just like an outpatient 10-minute procedure.
Yeah. How big was it though? Like for your hair to get tangled around it? Because I have,
Yeah.
I mean, we're going really into it. So after my first, I got what I thought was like a hemorrhoid, but it might, now that you're describing it, might be a giant skin tag by my butthole because, I was in the shower at the hospital, like washing myself like a day after I'd had the baby. And I'm like, I asked Vito, I go, what is this? And he says, it looks like a skin tag. And so I asked the nurse when she came in, I go, what is that? And she goes, oh, it's a hemorrhoid. And she just pushes it back into my butt with a glove on, with no lube, anything. It hurts so bad.
Oh,
God.
God.
It never hurt me. It never hurt. It didn't
Did it pop back out though?
Yeah, it's just
okay, because I used to pop mine back in and then they would always just gravity pop
it
back
just
out.
was always dangling outside my butt. So like, but then with my second, I actually got hemorrhoids that like were painful when I pooped. Like I would feel like I was pooping out glass. Like it was awful.
Oh, that's awful.
And so I had to do that breathing technique that the midwife was telling you before. Like my midwife told me that for like the post poop, she's like, just breathe through it. Just like, don't push it all. Just breathe like you're laboring. And I'm like, I legit, this might be worse than the birth. Like it was awful for a long time. So I ended up getting on a steroid cream to help. And now if I go a long time without it, it's not that it hurts a little bit, but it like bleeds. But I'm wondering if that's like a skin tag, like a big skin tag there.
It might be worth checking it out. I don't know. So you asked how big it was. I don't know if it was so much the size or more the shape, because I think it was tapered. You know, like the emoji of like a bag of money.
Yeah, that's how mine is.
I love this conversation.
Oh my gosh.
They put the thing in a little sample jar for me. And I was like, can I have that? And they were like, you're a weirdo, but yeah, I mean, it's your, so I'm like texting a photo. I texted a photo to my mother and I warned her. I was like, are you okay with, you know, you don't want to surprise somebody with that picture where they're like waiting in line at the supermarket.
Right. Totally.
And I sent it to my best friend too. I was like, look, how big was it? I don't know, maybe as long as like to the first joint of my pinky, maybe.
Okay.
Maybe
So
not
it's
even
pretty
that long.
big.
Yeah, but maybe not even that long. Not sure.
Yeah. Well, because also whenever I'm pregnant, I get a lot more skin tags. Like this last pregnancy, I got them like under my boobs.
Oh, wow.
And they're really small. But I had like a mole on my neck that got a lot bigger with my pregnancies. It's like a skin tag on my neck, but each pregnancy I have, it like grows.
So interesting. Is that like it must be a hormonal response.
Because I'll even like when I feel my neck, I can feel little tiny ones that came like when I was pregnant. So I'm like, maybe it is one. I don't know. I'm gonna have to look into that situation. That's so funny.
Crazy. Well, thank you for letting me be candid.
Yeah, of course. So moral of the story is practice, breathing when you're pooping to help with your labor.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'd love to talk about, so you went from being an occupational therapist at a hospital, to becoming an intuitive eating coach. Like, how did you make that transition?
Okay. Great question. It was, let me say, so I was an OT. And then actually there was another winding road in that path. From there, I moved to freelance writing. So I still do health and fitness journalism. I've written, content for brands and colleges, and I've written for like the Washington Post, Runner's World, Outside, Self, places like that. And it was, so that, I'm trying to think. So if my second kid is 8, the writing sort of started around, let me think. She was born in 2014. I had a blog just for fun. By 2015, I was like, let's give this writing thing a go. My husband was encouraging me not to go back to work because he saw that it was stressing me out. And then also, of course, like once you pay a babysitter or daycare, you're like, okay, cool. I barely have any money. And I know it's not just about the money.
Right.
You want to get out of the house, you want to have your profession, but it felt demoralizing. And it was like, all right, maybe, and I also didn't like the way healthcare was going. Healthcare is getting like so systematized and so much more about the bottom line and not about like, hi, I'm here with skills and creativity and professionalism, and I'm being told to practice my profession like it's a recipe. I did not care for that. So started writing health and fitness stuff. And then I found my own personal journey to intuitive eating in, trying to think, like 2018, right around my 40th birthday. I had been, I would say, a disordered eater all my life. And I think a lot of my behavior was what we consider normal in our culture. Things like skipping breakfast, intermittent fasting, avoiding carbs, only having dessert if I had worked out enough, or only on the weekends, or, lots and lots of rules, often breaking the rules, feeling guilty, all in the pursuit of, I had this mixture in my mind. It was healthy, and also in this quest to look how I thought I was supposed to look as an athlete. Like, I've run marathons, I've done Ironmans. If you saw me, I think I look athletic, so to speak, but if you saw me, like, you might not think I looked like anything special. And I thought that I deserved to have like ripped abs, when the truth is that's just not my body shape. Like, nobody in my family has a flat stomach. I'm not going to. I didn't before I had kids. I don't now. That's not my body type. But I couldn't deal with that. Like, I could not accept that. You're getting this message from every direction that thinner is better, thinner is healthier. It's, and I live in Boulder, Colorado, which is like an endurance athlete mecca. So you go to the gym and you're surrounded by, I'm not joking, like ex-Olympians, elite athletes, and you think they're like 7% body fat is normal. It's not normal,
which is not,
no, but that's what
especially
I'm
for
surrounded
women,
by. No. And so my lowest low, I think, was when I started counting macros. I got kind of into CrossFit, which I love CrossFit. I think it empowered me to feel comfortable with a barbell. I was doing athletic things I had never done before. It was so much fun. I was also starting to follow a lot of CrossFit accounts on Instagram. And again, nothing against, well, I won't say nothing against social media. There's the ups and the downs, but all those images were reinforcing that notion of like CrossFit athletes look a certain way. And a lot of CrossFit athletes count macros. And I was getting a lot of ads for macro counting apps. So I tried one, and it made me insane. It made me really insane. That, as with, I think, any diet. And of course, I wasn't saying it was a diet. I was like, oh, this is a lifestyle. This is just to get healthy. While my kids, my 2 daughters, are watching me weigh and measure all my food. Mom, why are you doing that? Oh, it's to be healthy. It wasn't to be healthy. I mean, and there's nothing healthy about obsessing about food. And that's what I was doing to make my macros work. I don't know if, your listeners are familiar with this concept, but basically you need a certain amount of carbs, fat, and protein each day. And fitting those all in is like a Tetris puzzle. Maybe it's just there's so much math, so much tracking, so much measuring. It's really hard to enjoy food that way, or to feel like, I remember going to ice cream with my family and being glad that we were going to Dairy Queen, and glad that we had planned it in advance, because I could, Dairy Queen's a place where you can go online and find out the calories and fat and carbs of all the food. And then I could sort of slot that in and be like, okay, if I'm eating that at 7, this is what I need to eat all day so that can work. That's so stressful.
Sounds exhausting.
100%. And then I would do this thing where I'd be like doing well all week, and then Friday night, have a glass or 2 of wine, get a little tipsy, raid the pantry, feel disgusting, repeat. It's just this terrible cycle. And I always thought, I never saw it as disordered. I just thought I should be eating a certain way. I'm a hard worker. I've done things that are, I've gotten a master's degree. I've completed an Ironman. I've done all these things. Why can't I just do this? Why can't I eat the quote unquote right way? Never realizing that it was like the diets that were failing me, not me failing. Our bodies, when we are restricted, as I'm sure you know, it's natural to then binge. That's just what bodies do. It's no one's fault. I
Mhm.
mean, it's diet culture's fault for telling us that this works. And if you did it wrong, well, like, too bad, you messed up.
Right, totally. And I feel like what you just described is how everybody feels at some point, like where they're like, how come I can't just eat this way? Like how like, and it seems like everybody else is doing it, right? Like, especially if you're on social media or whatever. And it's like, it seems like nobody else struggles with this. And it's like, no, every person at some point, I feel like, especially in our culture, has like, I've had that thought, like, why can't I just eat healthy all the time? And
Mm-hmm.
it's like, okay, you're not the only person who has this thought. This isn't a problem that's only yours. And that when you do that, especially restrictive thing, then you swing the other way. Like, I know for me,
Absolutely.
anytime I tell myself, like, you're cutting out all sugar, I do fine. And then I am like, well, I'm just gonna have to eat this box of cookies so that they're out of the house. Like, like
100%. Yeah. And it's like, that's so messed up. Yet we don't see it that way. It's like every meal is like the last supper because I'm going to be good tomorrow. And it creates this when I was pregnant with my first child, I remember distinctly being shocked at how little I craved sweets. And I wonder, looking back, sure, it could have been hormonal, but I have to wonder if mentally I gave myself permission to eat whatever I wanted because I was pregnant. I think, and now as an intuitive eater, I'm seeing a lot of the same things. Sure. Do I like sweets? Yes. Do I have a little chocolate at night most nights? Yes. But I'm not obsessed the way I used to be. And I think a
right,
huge part of that is that it's the mental piece of because I know I have permission to eat whatever I want, whenever I want, I'm not obsessed.
right, right. I think that that's like such a good message to get across because we're still bombarded with those messages all the time. Um, and for me, I've had to set a lot of boundaries with even like I've been on this like whole non-toxic thing for a while. And just like the other day, even I logged in and I found out another thing out there's killing us, right? And I'm like, I had to just like unfollow this account that I've followed for a long
Yeah.
time, gotten a lot of information from, because I'm like, I literally can't eat anything or do anything because all of it's full of toxins, all of it's full of chemicals, all of it's killing us. And I'm like, I can't afford to replace every piece of furniture in my
No,
house. Like
no,
it's just
no,
like things like
exactly.
that.
It's like living is toxic. Let's face it. From the minute you're born,
Right.
you're dying. How do you want to live? I mean, if you want to live like that's the thing. I don't want to judge anyone for being in diet culture or, having PFAS chemicals in their house, whatever. If it's going to stress you out and you think that the cost benefit relationship is like worth it for you, fine. But if it's not working anymore, I think it's so important for people to know there is another way.
Right.
You it's just we've been acculturated to think, nope, this is the only way, and thin is always best. And the truth is that like healthy doesn't necessarily look a certain way. I think that's the crux of intuitive eating too, is
Yeah.
like being okay with letting your body settle at whatever weight it settles at. And I know that's easier said than done. And I acknowledge that I'm saying this from like a thin body. I don't think it would be easy to want to spread this message in a bigger body because weight stigma is a real thing. But yeah, I mean, I think part of intuitive eating is also accepting body diversity. It's
Right.
okay if you're not thin. Like bodies weren't all meant to look the same way. Period.
Mhm. Mhm. Totally. And like there's a huge problem with the BMI index as well. Like that's just
Yes.
like not
Don't
an
get me started.
indicator, right? Not an indicator of health. I see this so much with in pregnancy too. Like they'll be like, oh, well, there's, her BMI is really high, whatever. And I'm like, it looks so different on every single person. And even the weight gains for pregnancy are so messed up. Like I've had people say like, oh, my doctor said like I can't gain any more weight this pregnancy. I'm like, well, how are you feeling? Like, how do you feel? Do you feel good? Do you whatever? Like, is it an excuse to eat a gallon of ice cream every night? No, like you probably shouldn't be doing that. But at the same time, like I had weird cravings when I was pregnant. There were certain things I couldn't eat, certain things I could. And I gained more with both my pregnancies than the quote unquote,
Yeah.
whatever you are. But I didn't feel bad about it because like I knew the research and I'm like, this
That's
doesn't matter,
that's what I
like
was gonna say. Like, what research is it based on that a certain amount of weight is okay and a certain amount of weight is not okay? Like, how do you even test that? Like,
right,
I
right,
just, I mean, I guess you could do
right,
an observational study, but it's so rooted in like diet culture.
right. And I
So
liked how you said like letting your body kind of settle because like we don't let that it's hard to get to that place where you do let your body kind of settle. And I know like for me, it was through my healing journey where I kind of went one way and then the other. And like I found this place where it's really interesting, like whether I'm working out a lot or not, or whether I'm eating really healthy or not, I'm pretty much the same size.
Yeah, I so feel that because, well, yeah, we've been conditioned to think that like our body size is so manipulatable. I don't know if that's a word, but like for my best friends, actually the doctor friend who I shared my butt problem with, she had a big surprise 40th birthday, and in advance of it, somebody was like, "Hey, we're doing a scrapbook for her. Please share any old photos or anything that you have of her." So I went back into my archives and I found, I've been best friends with her since I was 8. I have many photos of us together. To your point, I could not believe how it didn't matter how much exercise I was doing, what I was eating, where I was living, what was going on. I looked generally the same for the last 20, no, 30 years of my life. 40 years? Yeah, 35 years. And I looked at all those photos and it was a wake up call to me of like, how much time did you waste trying to change something that really doesn't want to change? It's
Right.
okay.
Totally. Like my thighs have always loved each other. They love to
Yeah.
rub together. Like like in my fittest, quote unquote, fittest, whatever, they were still touching. Like it's,
Yeah. And it's just
I'm
like, you get to decide how you feel about that. Like there was a time in my life, especially when I was working at a particular hospital where they gave us free scrubs. So I was wearing their scrubs. I'll probably every quarter someone would ask if I was pregnant. This was through my 20s when I was decidedly not pregnant. And it hurt my feelings like crazy. And I remember calling my mother crying, and she would be like, "Wait, didn't you already tell me this story?" And I'd be like, "No, it happened again." Um, and then it happened again, maybe 3 years ago. I was at a potluck. It was like professional networking event, and this woman asked me, "Oh, so are you expecting?" And it was
who, oh my God.
wild. Yeah, it was wild because I completely, without even trying, I just flipped the script. Instead of going, "This means something awful about me," I realized it's totally okay if my stomach protrudes. This means something socially awkward about her.
Oh,
Like,
totally.
there's no reason for her to ask that, but instead of going in this shame spiral of like, "I look pregnant, but I'm not. What does it mean? What da, 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 da." I was just like, "What? I don't even care." But I had to rewrite that story that like my stomach sticking out meant something versus it actually
Hmm.
means nothing. This is the body I was born with. It's fine.
Right, right, right. And I feel like we have been had a huge disservice because of, again, the culture, what we were sold. I remember when I was growing up, it was just the stick thin image and abs. And I'm somebody who's also never had abs. And like, for the most part, the feminine body isn't meant to be like extremely sculpted. And like you're saying, like you're at the gym with like ex professional athletes. Like that's another story.
Yeah.
Also, like celebrities that are on magazines, they have personal trainers, personal chefs. They like
Yeah.
stress to like be a certain way
That's
for these
that's their
certain
job.
roles. Right. Like it's not normal life at
No.
all.
No, it really isn't. But so once I figured out, okay, intuitive eating is the only way to go, I started just reading. I think the bug was in my ear, but once I was like, macro counting does not work for me. I have to let this go. I started reading, doing more research. And at that time now, I'm like, I still love writing, but I missed working with people. And I was like, intuitive eating coaching really blends my love for working with and helping people and this, message that I want to share, which is we have, it's our birthright to eat what we want to eat. We are the experts on our bodies. So yeah, I got certified as an intuitive eating counselor this year, and it's been really fun to have a role in other people's journeys to trusting themselves again.
Yeah. Building that trust is really hard. I remember when I was in my healing journey, I went to a lot of therapists that weren't very great. And somebody referred me to a nutritionist maybe. And she was like, she wanted me to write down and track everything I ate for a few days.
Even she
And
knew you had a history of an eating
yeah,
disorder.
that's why I was there. And like
Yeah.
I couldn't do it. Like I wanted to lie, I wanted to whatever, and I'm like, that this is a part of my life that's extremely shameful. Like I this isn't something that like I want to put out there, and me writing it down does not do any service for me. Like me putting down everything I ate that day, that creates more shame. That
Yeah.
creates more like guilt. That sends me over the edge. Like, why you want me to write down that I ate 4 donuts then threw it up? Like, that's what you want to hear? Like it I couldn't really trust myself. I didn't want to share my journey. And so like it's hard getting to a place to learn how to trust yourself again. Especially
Yeah.
when we've been in this diet culture, we've been in the yo-yo, we've been in the back and forth. I mean, like we're recording this in February and pretty soon we're going to see all the get your body swimsuit ready, like get your summer bod. And I realized that I heard it growing up a lot. Like I
Oh
did
yeah.
hear like people in my life being like, "Oh, I'm too fat to wear that." Like older people,
Yep.
the grown-ups saying things like that. And so then that plants that seed in your mind that like, oh, so you can be too fat to wear certain things, like you don't think of that
Yeah.
as a kid.
No, but it's there. It's like in the air. I remember, this is embarrassing, but I remember making fun of fat people as a kid, like for being fat, um, in front of and to grown-ups, and grown-ups not saying, that's not okay. That's
Mm-hmm.
really not okay. I can't imagine my parents being okay with me being kind of cruel to like anybody else for any other reason, but somehow that was like funny or acceptable.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up with hearing my dad say really critical things of fat people on TV. Like we'd be watching TV and I don't even want to like repeat the things that he said, but it's not nice. And when he says those things in front of my kids, I call it out. I'm just like, girls, do not listen to Papa. I'm just like, Dad, like can you not talk like that in front of my kids? He will ignore me, but at least I
Right.
can say to my kids, look, your grandfather is archaic and mean and we don't do that.
Right, right. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And like I feel like just really spreading that message that like the deserving factor, because I know for me I'm like I genuinely thought, I remember believing it so true, that once I was a certain size, my boyfriend at the time was going to finally see that I was the one, or that my life would fall into place. Like once I hit this weight, everything in life was going to work out. And it's like that. Do you see how crazy that is? Like looking back, it's like
You don't
you're not
see
going
it
to,
when you're in it.
right. It's not like you're going to hit this number and then happiness is going to come. It's like, no, you got to find joy in your life. And when you're stressing yourself out and living in this continuous state of fight or flight, like that's not going to come.
Yeah, I cannot agree with you more. Like if somebody were to come to me as a client and be like, I want to do intuitive eating and I want to lose weight. Can you help me? I would have to ask them to your point, what do you think would change if you lost weight? Let's start there. What do you think would be different?
Right.
Because that's worth unpacking. I don't even, yeah, in my head, same thing. I was like, if I lost weight, I could look in the mirror and accept myself and I would be free of self doubt and I would love myself and I would be attractive and people would see me in a different way. Like, what?
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So,
So what does intuitive eating like look like when people come and work with you? Since it's not, hey, I want to hit this number on the scale.
yeah, it looks like completely renegotiating your relationship with food. It's like we talked about restoring trust back with yourself. It's honoring your taste preferences. It's respecting your hunger and fullness cues. At the same time, also honoring your energy requirements. Like I'm actually writing an article for Self right now that'll probably be out by the time this airs on why it actually is sometimes good to eat when you're not hungry,
Mm-hmm.
particularly for exercisers, because exercise can blunt your appetite, but that doesn't mean you don't need to eat. And even though intuitive eating relies on trusting your own body's cues, it also is honoring what you need and eating can be a form of self-care when you eat even if you're not hungry. Like if you just went for a 90-minute run, maybe you're not hungry but your body needs that fuel. So part of intuitive eating is honoring that. It's also learning to honor your emotions. While food can be a source of comfort, and that's okay. That's not shameful. That's not bad. I think we get this message of like, how does end emotional eating? Intuitive eating isn't asking you to completely end intuitive eating, or I'm sorry, to end emotional eating, but it is asking you to say, let's slow down and recognize what emotions we're experiencing when we are reaching for food.
Mm-hmm.
While it is totally okay to eat when you're not actually hungry, right? Like how many times do we want to eat a piece of birthday cake because it's there and we want to celebrate and you're not starving, you just had dinner. That's okay. That's okay. But like when you're in the pantry mindlessly at 9 o'clock at night after the kids are in bed, slow down and go, okay, like, am I bored? Am I stressed? Is there something else I can do to manage this emotion? And like, maybe there's not, but like, but having a bag of tricks, so to speak, or tools, like I could journal right now, I could meditate right now, I could call a friend, I could snuggle my dog, I could go for a walk, whatever. Having other resources available to you. Those are just a few of what intuitive eating. I mean, there's 10 principles, but it's basically like unpacking and trying your best. I can't say that you're going to ever completely unlearn everything you've been
Right.
taught about thinness and food, because I mean, what? It's like your whole life of conditioning, but being aware of it. It starts with being aware of it, trying to untangle from it, and knowing that you know more about your body than anybody else. Finding joy in movement, like not exercising to burn calories, but moving because it feels good, and eating, nutrient dense foods, not because they're quote unquote good and because processed food is quote unquote bad, but because you notice that, hey, when I eat more vegetables, maybe like I poop more regularly. Maybe I just have more energy. I don't feel as like bogged down. I just feel better. So it's not, part of it is just having full permission to eat all foods and stop, and no longer like moralizing foods, no longer going, oh, I'm going to be good and have the salad. It's like, I'm going to have a salad if I want the salad.
Mm-hmm.
Now when I go out to eat, instead of this stressful mindset of like, oh my God, I ate too much today, I'm going to have a salad. I'm like, I'm going to show up and look at the menu. And if I want a salad, I will get it. And if I want the hamburger, I will get it. And if I'm enjoying the hamburger and like halfway through, I realize I'm pretty full and I don't want it anymore, I'll probably stop eating it. Instead
Yeah.
of like, I'm out to dinner and tomorrow I'm eating salad, so I'm gonna eat the whole thing and feel gross after. I don't do that anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's such a good way of putting it. Um, I feel like a lot of these patterns too, like we've seen the past down, like not only the talk or like hearing adults like doing diet culture and having that be like a regular conversation in our homes, but like at least for me, like I did see disordered eating with my parents too. um like my dad mindlessly going through everything, which he still does.
Mm-hmm.
And we're like, dad, like, not to like make him feel guilty or anything, but I'm like, what do you want? Like, are you hungry? Do you want me to make you a snack? Do you want, like you're just like mindlessly eating things and like not thinking about it.
Mm-hmm.
And or like restricting and things like that. Like there's so much that I feel like I did see like growing up, and really wanting to change that for our kids. So like not having your kids see you weighing every single thing, measuring every single thing, and doing all of that, and really trying to teach our kids how to eat intuitively, like not you have to finish everything on your plate.
Yes. Yeah, we don't do that. And I tell babysitters, I think we've had a couple sitters that like didn't get the memo and they were like, oh, she made us eat the carrots before we could have dessert. So I tell sitters like it doesn't matter, whatever they eat of their dinner, like if they want to have dessert after, like, I don't care. Um, That's fine because yeah, what are you teaching a kid when you're like, you have to finish your dinner in
Right, you
order
have
to
to
get
earn it.
dessert?
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to earn it, and you're also completely ignoring your hunger cues.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, I'm getting full on this thing that I don't even want, so I can have this other thing. And it's like part of intuitive eating that I think is so powerful is that it kind of trains you to tune into your intuition in life. When you're doing it 3 to 5 times a day, every time you eat, to be like, what do I feel like? How much? What type of food? When? Asking yourself those questions, not relying on an app or a diet to tell you. When you're asking yourself those questions, you're just getting more and more practice of like when a business opportunity comes your way, how do I feel about that? There's a friendship in your life. Is it really serving me? You get a text asking you to go out for drinks, and you're like, what does my body say? That feeling of like, yes, I
Mm-hmm.
want to do it, or like, no, I don't want to do it. Instead of being in your head so much, I think it helps you be more in your heart to make all kinds of decisions in life and honor what you really want way beyond meal times and snack times.
Right, right. Yeah, that totally makes sense. um I've realized like one thing that I've gotten better at too is learning how to really nourish myself throughout the day so that I don't have ups and downs, and like really working on not skipping breakfast. Like that's been huge for me. Like adding, like me eating. I know some people say like you have to eat in the first 30 minutes of waking up. For me, it's usually just not realistic with my two kids. Like
Yeah.
we're slow in the morning. Our bedrooms are upstairs. So they crawl, come crawl in bed. I'm nursing one, or I'm cuddling the other. Then we
Yeah.
slowly like get dressed, brush our teeth. By the time like diapers are changed, whatever, we're downstairs. It's been 45 minutes, an hour. Like, I don't know,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
it's not like I can't like just hop out of bed and make breakfast right away. But like within the first couple hours, I always eat a very nutrient dense breakfast. And that has made a huge difference in my life. Just as far as like trying to stay nourished throughout the day. Cause I was realizing in this season of life as a mom, then I wouldn't eat until like 2 o'clock in the afternoon or, and then be like, why am I so hangry? Like, why am I, and then I'm like snacking before dinner, like while I'm eating, while I'm making dinner because I'm so hungry. Like I
Right.
can't
You're
wait
trying
for
to play
dinner.
catch up. Yeah.
Right. And I'm like, man, like really trying to throughout the day, just realizing small things, like make it, I'm like, okay, what can I grab quick to like just help me feel nourished? Like
Yeah.
I'm eating breakfast
Yeah.
a little bit later, this, and then, lunch, not just eating the scraps off their plates for lunch, like
Yep.
actually eating lunch
Yeah,
and
sitting down, enjoying it, like really being mindful about it is part of it.
right.
Yeah, where I used to always eat like a certain ratio of like carbs to fat to protein because I was on the zone diet and the zone diet was telling me to do this. Um, Now I try to eat a little protein. I mean, if I don't get it, fine. But like if all I have is an apple because that's what's around, I'll eat it. But like I'm not as rigid, but I know, okay, if I eat that apple with like a little bit of like cheese, I'm
Mm-hmm.
just going to have more energy for longer. So it's about, and that's like, as far as like what I do with clients, I wouldn't have them track everything they ate all day, but I might say, hey, when you make this change, I want you to just track it. This one change. Like if you're not a breakfast eater, why don't you start eating breakfast and just note the days you eat breakfast and maybe what you had, if that's not too triggering, and how you felt.
Right.
It's about noticing patterns and just honoring those patterns.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it can be hard for sure. I think that I was talking to you before we recorded about like the eating disorder and how like I found healing. And although like those thoughts aren't there, like I definitely still struggle with guilt when it comes to like sugar or sweets or whatever. And being like I said, being like, okay, we're cutting out all sugar. Cause my husband and I both do it. We're like, okay, we've been going crazy. We're cutting out all sugar, but and then we like go overboard and eat way too much and then scale it back and like really trying to find that balance of like, it's okay. Like if you want to have a
Yeah.
cookie, have a cookie,
Yeah.
don't
Yeah.
have a dozen.
Have you read anything by Christy Harrison? She wrote The Anti-Diet and she's coming out with a book called The Wellness Trap. And she's kind of calls out that like what really is the point of cutting out an entire food group? Like, is it
Mm-hmm.
really, it's not sustainable? Is it grounded in science? Like all of this, she's basically like, it's kind of questionable. She's a anti-diet dietitian and journalist. And I really like her work. I think it's helpful to just dig in and go, wait, why am I doing this?
Right, right. What was her name again?
Christy Harrison. She also has a podcast called Food Psych, which I enjoy.
Yeah, I'll have to check it out.
Yeah.
No, but I mean, I agree with that. Like, it definitely sends you kind of into that yo-yo thing, and then the guilt and shame, which we know is not good while you're eating, or just even in your life, right? So you don't want to
Yeah.
be eating in a stressful state. You don't want to be living in that state. So, definitely, that's something that I'm working on. I've done really well in the past, and then, I feel like as a mom too, that season of life where you're tired, you're not getting enough sleep, you're not whatever. So I tend to crave more sugar because my body's
Yes.
probably like, I need something like,
Yes,
like, but
absolutely.
whereas like, I know when I eat more just nourishing foods, I don't have the crashes and I don't like, I feel better or sustained for longer versus like, oh, just give me a hit, let's
Yep.
go.
Yeah. No, totally. Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wait, how old is your oldest?
2.5 and
Okay.
1 years old. So they're exactly 18 months apart.
Okay. Yeah,
Um,
you're really in it.
yeah,
It's a really tough time. I will tell you, like, all thing even though there's no phase, I don't think there's any phase of parenting that's like not without its challenges.
right. Totally.
I mean, now that my kids are in fifth grade and third grade, I am consistently, sleeping through the night. If we can even leave that, we've gone out to dinner before and left them alone. Like it's a whole new world and it feels like it will never come, but it does.
Right. I know. I know. And we're enjoying it. Like that's also been like the mindset shift for
Yeah.
me because I feel like in the mom culture, you get so caught up in complaining. Like it's so hard, it's so hard, it's so tough, it's, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, okay, let's just like one thing I've been really trying to understand lately too is just that life, let's just throw the blanket statement out there. Life in general is hard. There's not one person that just has the easiest life. Like you have to get up, you have to take care of your house, you have to take care of your family, you have to take care of yourself. Like there's always going to be something, like a flat tire might have, whatever, but you don't want to
Yeah.
have that attitude of like, oh, well, it's always something and there's always something going wrong. And it's like, right. But how many of the millions of things are going right for you to even exist right now? Like,
Yes.
like really trying to shift that mentality for myself, because I can get in that like, woe is me, like I haven't slept, I'm exhausted, I'm not working out like I want to, I'm not blah, 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 blah. And then I feel like crap. And it's like, wait a second. First of all, get off social media and stop comparing yourself.
Yes. It's
Like
huge.
second, like just be present with your kids. Like when I'm sitting there being present with my kids, not on the phone, not distracted, whatever,
Yeah.
I care less that the house is a mess versus like when I'm on my phone being distracted, trying to do 100 things at once, and then being like, oh, I didn't get this done, I didn't put the laundry away again, and like beating myself
Yes.
up, versus like sitting there and being present and playing with them and being like, you know what, I'll get to the laundry another day, I'm having fun with
Yes.
my kids, I'm enjoying it, whatever. Yeah, my house doesn't look Instagrammable, and
Yeah.
that's fine.
That is fine. Yeah, and that reminds me I of like a really handy mindset shift that helps me so much because I'm very type A. I very much thrive on like I got this done, I accomplished this, I did blah, blah. Two things. One is when I feel like in that comparison mindset, I'll shift it to be like, could I compare myself now to me 5 years ago? I am doing all kinds of really cool things that I never dreamed of 5 years ago. That if like 5 years ago me saw me now, she'd be like, damn, you're on fire, girl.
Mm-hmm.
So A, that's helpful. But B, sometimes instead of like letting my to-do list rule me, I'll go back to like, what are my personal core values? Like, I know what I value. I value connection. I love doing things like this. I value creativity. I value curiosity. Have I incorporated any one of those things into my day that day? If I have, then I'm like, cool, that's a win. And
Mm-hmm.
most of those things have not a lot to do with checking anything, checking boxes. Like, and so that's huge because your to-do list is always going to be there. It's never going to be
Always.
done.
Right. 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 And you don't need to tell me that. Like, you don't need to tell me, like, it's always something, life is hard, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, we all know that. Like, let's just understand life's really hard sometimes. Sometimes it sucks, but it's also really awesome, like, and
Yeah.
that's really been a hard mindset shift for me that, like, I'm working on, and my husband and I have like talked a lot about. And I talked about how like this year I don't really set resolutions or anything, but I'm like, I want my theme. He was asking me on my birthday. I just turned 36. And he's
Happy
like,
birthday.
thanks. He's like, what do you want for your 36th year? And the only thing that kept coming to my mind is the word fun. And I'm like, I want to have fun this year. Like my kids are only going to be this little ones. I want to have fun with them. I want to enjoy them instead of getting so stressed out that they pulled everything out of every drawer again. That's going to happen every single day. So just accept it. Like,
Yes.
this is a part of your
Yes.
day, and don't, like, have fun with it. Like, be present with them. And those things, because everybody who's later on in the seasons are like, the laundry's always going to be there. This is always going to be there. But yet we still continue to beat ourselves up in these seasons.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, no, you're right. Like, there's certain things, like, I can't have any dishes in the sink when I go to bed. And I like things to be semi at least picked up.
Yep.
Like, it doesn't have to be perfectly clean, organized. I don't want to wake up to a sink full of dishes.
Totally.
So I'm like, once the kids are down for bed, clean up the kitchen, whatever, we're good. Make my bed in the
Yep.
morning. Those are the two things that it's
Yep.
like,
If you have a
okay,
cup,
whatever.
right. Did you happen to read or listen to the podcast, The Lazy Genius with, I think her name is
Mm-mm.
Kendra Adachi? She's awesome. She's basically saying, decide what really matters to you. And then, do that thing all out, whatever it might be. And then decide the other things that you don't maybe care about as much about, like maybe you don't enjoy cooking. Fine. Make a meal rotation that's the same every 2 weeks so you don't have to think about it. Or
Right.
maybe you love getting people gifts. Shop for them, have fun with it. If you don't, have a policy. Teachers get a Starbucks gift cards. My kids' friends for their birthdays, they get cash. I don't go to Target and buy them something. And then you've simplified. So she's like, simplify what doesn't matter to you, but like enjoy the details of the things that do, but decide what those things are. And so what you're describing like sounds very lazy genius to me.
Nice. I'm gonna have to look into that. All right,
Yeah, I
that one
think
down.
you would like her. She's cool.
All right. Well, I got on this like huge tangent with all of that. I think just like I haven't really like shared that on here yet, like the word and the theme and stuff, and just like really trying to make that shift. But I feel like that plays into everything, the intuitive eating, into all of
Mm-hmm.
that, like really not looking at this is hard or whatever, but like, how do I get to enjoy life? How do I get to nourish myself today? How do I get to, show up for myself, for my kids, whatever. And each day it's going to look different. There's days where
Yep.
I am probably not the most pleasant person. You wake up on the wrong side of the bed. And there's days where it's great. So, and that's life. And that's not just you, that's every single person on the planet.
Yes, absolutely. And like you were talking about like your journey with the eating disorder and now like with sugar and stuff, I think it's important to also point out like just like you're going to have good days and bad days with life, same thing with eating. Like you'll have days where you just enjoy all the food and then you might have days where you second guess some or all of the food. That's okay.
Yeah.
Any journey is going to have setbacks as you're trying to do things differently. It's fine.
Right. Absolutely. So before we wrap up, I have one question for you, and then I want you to share where people can follow you, get in touch with you.
Great.
So are you drinking coffee? Is that what you're drinking right now?
I was, yes.
Okay. How do you take your coffee?
Always with half and half always half and half, almost never sugar. Only if I'm like in a restaurant and it's like way too strong, I might add sugar. Yeah.
So just black coffee, half and half.
Yeah. If I'm getting like an Americano, that's like my go-to at a coffee shop as my espresso drink. If I get an Americano, I like a 16-ounce double shot Americano with a shot of steamed soy milk. That's another go-to. But
Nice.
yeah, once in a while I'll drink a black if I have run out. I would rather have it black usually than with 2% or 1% or skim milk. I just don't like that.
That's interesting.
And if I make the coffee myself, like I use a pour over, I really enjoy it. I don't mind it black, but yeah.
Right. Yeah. That's interesting that for me, I feel like I don't see that much difference between like half and half or 2% or like whole milk.
Oh, I'm like the princess and the pea over here.
Yeah. Well, awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on. Where can people find and follow you and learn more about your intuitive eating
Yeah,
coaching?
thanks for asking. The best place is probably my website. It's Pam-Moore, like Moore.com. You can find me on Instagram. I'm not there a ton, but Pam Moore 303. I'm also Pam Moore 303 on TikTok. I'm Pam Moore Writer on Twitter. But yeah, website is the best thing. And for any of your listeners who happen to be around like the Boulder, Denver, Front Range, Colorado area, I'm doing an intuitive eating 1-day retreat on May 6th. I'm not sure when you're going to air this.
I'll make sure that I air it before then.
Awesome. Yeah. Info about that is on my website under the events tab. So that would be super fun to meet any listeners in person.
Yeah. Awesome. Cool. And I'll include the link in the show notes for that so that if anybody's in that area, they can find you. Awesome. Well, thank you again so much for coming on the podcast today. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you, Liz. It was a blast.